From the vermilion scars of Avernus to the unknowable voids of Nessus, the totality of the Nine Hells represent an architecture of structured order so perfectly conceived that even accounting for the supreme evil that coats every inch of its 9 layers, the gods themselves must view its construction with a certain grim admiration. And it all begins with the Crimson Gateway. No known mortal has ever entered the Nine Hells without first setting foot upon Avernus, and in doing so, one quickly realizes that even the ground beneath presents the first and most persistent challenge to one's survival. Avernus is an expansive wasteland of viscera-glazed and barren plains that stretch taut like the skin of a chain devil, interrupted by jagged hills that rise like broken bones. The landscape ranges in colors from crimson and red rust hues to charcoal blacks, with occasional veins of sickly yellow sulfurs or pools of bubbling, toxic blue-green liquid that defy any natural chemistry, all illuminated by a dull glow that hangs suspended in the air. Yet the Avernian sky hosts no sun and no cycle of day or night. This lack of rhythm bleeds into mortal perceptions as time here seems to lose its familiar cadence, stretching during moments of torment only to compress when fleeting hope arises. Days, weeks, even years, such mortal measures are said to become meaningless hash marks against the ever-present fear, and the consistent explorer accounts are too numerous to be simply discarded. Regardless, under its brooding light, the domain is littered with the carnage and detritus of countless battles, rusted and blood-stained weapons, and the bleached bones of every type of fiend known, each protruding from the war-torn earth. Strange stone shapes dot the terrain, many bearing the disturbing resemblance of agonized faces, victims fossilized mid-scream. Though whether these are actual petrified beings or a psychological trick played upon the mind remains hotly debated among scholars who have never actually visited these realms of the purest evil. However, for the select few who have witnessed Avernus firsthand, the adventurer tales are many. They tell of whispered screams fusing with the stench of brimstone smoke and the familiar metallic copper of stale blood that continually assaults the senses, all carried on scorching winds. Simply traversing this broken terrain proves its own special form of hazard, as adventurers must always be mindful of the sharp obsidian and quartz crystals that jut unpredictably from the ground, as well as long-buried blades and other discarded weapons of the blood war that can hobble a traveler with each step. The firmament of Avernus is one of perpetual hostility. Toxic clouds of choking smoke from the wreckage and remnants of non-stop battle roll across the plains as showers of flaming meteors ignite anything they touch. These fireballs are spit from the depressing sky at unpredictable and random intervals, shrieking like meteors formed of contempt and hate before exploding upon the already pocked and pulverized surface, each leaving vast craters of fiery devastation stacking one upon another in a continuous cycle of ruin. A little-known explorer from Sigil named Tascathar once wrote upon his return from Avernus before his own disappearance that the plains of Avernus breathe with the collective agony of countless damned. Stepping upon the ground itself overwhelms the unprepared as the agonized land pulses beneath your feet in a rhythm all too similar to a mortal heartbeat, leaving an unshakable, morbid feeling that you have walked not the earth, but upon the exposed organs of some colossal and tortured entity. But both legends and lore tell us it was not always this way. There was once a time that Avernus was said to be a deceptively beautiful realm, a serene, vibrant plane that served a dual purpose: to present a welcoming if deceitful entry point for those traveling from the material plane, an illusion intended to tempt, seduce, and ultimately corrupt mortals, while also luring the souls of the recently dead from the fugue plane into continuing onward into their infernal afterlife. In those ancient, nearly forgotten times, travelers would find a land of false paradise, complete with amber skies and pleasant meadows, all meant to mask the underlying cruelty that awaits. But that illusion was long ago stripped away. Innumerable millennia of non-stop war have scarred and scorched Avernus into its current state, leaving no trace of such serenity. The early 2nd edition lore found in the Planescape text offers the etymology of the name Avernus, roughly translated as "without birds" in the ancient Batorian tongue. And indeed, you will find no birds upon this land, or any naturally living creatures for that matter. Avernus is a dominion not intended for any but the infernal and the damned. In fact, Avernus offers almost no other natural flora or fauna. One of the few known sightings of plant life, as told by surviving explorers, is found along the shores of select stretches of the River Styx, where hardy scrubs of poisonous vegetation are fed by the foul waters. These vile weeds cling to the river's banks, tough, saw-edged marsh grasses and pallid mosses. Through an evolutionary cycle of growth and decay, these plants have formed treacherous bogs of stinking rot, where the Styx periodically breaches its banks, the overflowing floods spreading its corruption. There also exist some cryptic explorer accounts that mention a dull red moss, said to be edible, that rarely sprouts from the impact craters left by the streaking meteors that fall from the sky. But those claims aside, any semblance of natural life here is but the most unholy of anomalies. Far less a realm of paradise lost than agony found and ongoing, the Avernus of today is purely a grim theater of war, punishment, and suffering. The River Styx serves as the main artery of Hell's first layer and one of the primary means of access to the Nine Hells. This legendary river of infamy and oblivion extends far beyond Avernus, its dark flows spanning across much of the lower planes, traversing realms such as Pandemonium, the Abyss, Carceri, Hades, Gehenna, and Acheron as it makes its first odious passage through Hell, beginning in Avernus. The extensive reach of these polluted waters makes the river, despite its well-known and documented dangers, an indispensable channel for travel and transport, connecting the many disparate and dangerous realms. The Styx cuts through the first layer as a broad, powerful current, a mix of oily Stygian waters. It enters through a rocky gorge at one end of Avernus before vanishing into a maw-like cavern at the other. Eventually, the river is said to re-emerge on the fifth layer, Stygia, although it must be noted some lore is conflicted in the exact course and destination of the Styx. An understandable uncertainty for mortal explorers, scholars, and even cartographers, given how few have ever stepped foot upon Avernus, much less the deeper layers below. What is certain is the understanding that the river's presence in Avernus is a double-edged sword. Regardless of its pathing, the cursed waters of the Styx are a conduit for both souls as well as a strategic and perilous route for Hell's armies. Infused with unholy magic, any who drink from or even touch its waters risk having their memories erased and their minds reduced to witless shells, adding yet another layer of danger to an already supremely dangerous landscape. Many a hapless soul has stumbled onto the shores of the mighty Styx only to rise moments later with eyes turned dull and blank, all their life's memories dissolved into the river's sludgy waters. These unfortunate souls, the Styx drowned as they're called, often wander in mindless confusion until some devilish slaver rounds them up for processing, becoming another drop of soul fuel for the infernal war machine of the Nine Hells. The lore of earlier texts offers its own travel warning to be wary of Omnizu, or Styx devils as they are commonly referred, known to frequently patrol the river. These arrogant ice agents of Avernus vigilantly seek out and punish those traversing the river without proper authorization. Papers, please, I imagine being a common utterance of the arrogant Omnizu. Hellish border agents, the Omnizu devils employ additional fiends such as Orthons, Advespas, and Hellwasps to track down those that break Hell's ordered rules of travel, thus ensuring that the river is not used as an unregulated passageway. It should be noted that the moniker of Styx Devil is less applicable to the modern-day Omnizu, as these Batazu fiends are the benefactors of perhaps the single most significant glow-up of any devil across any edition. Beginning with their 5th edition form, the Omnizu have been greatly empowered from their 3rd edition challenge rating of 7, which was an appropriate level for their role as the River's Hall Monitor, to its current 5 ECR of 18, representing a tremendous leap to place the devil near the apex of the Hell's fiendish hierarchy, answering only to the mighty Pit Fiend. Now among the elite, 5th edition Omnizu Devils are far less likely to be found manning boats or patrolling near such dangerous waters, leaving those menial tasks to Orthons, Bearded Devils, and others below its status and station. For those seeking to navigate the Styx in the safest manner possible, Marinoloth boatmen are a reliable if pricey option for the well-funded traveler. Another species of fiend called daemons or Yugoloths, these neutral evil variants have carved out their own cottage industry within the Nine Hells and are widely considered to be among the most expert of navigators, routinely offering their services to guide travelers across and down the river's treacherous waters. Better known by their informal name of Charon Devils for obvious visual reasons by those who use their services, these pale skeletal ferrymen certainly look the part of the undead, but I assure you they are very much of the fiendish phenotype. While a Marinoloth should never be considered anything but selfish and evil, being loyal only to their boat and your coin, these mercenary boatmen have little to no incentive to harm any travelers of the Hells, regardless of any authorization, paperwork, or lack thereof, so long as your coin is true, thus making the Marinoloth boatman the best ask-no-questions option for safe river travel you're likely to find in the Nine Hells or anywhere across the lower plains. Finally, even the infamous River Styx cannot escape the influence of Avernus. The river enters the first layer of Hell from the lower plains as a dark, murky flow, its waters a dismal blend of black and gray. However, as the river winds through the battle-scarred landscape, it takes on new, uniquely gruesome properties as its waters move with a deceptive sluggishness, becoming thick and viscous, dyed a deep arterial red by the relentless carnage and runoff from the endless conflict and death. But that is only partially true. The writings of many explorers and scholars often add that the Sanguine transformation is so profound that in Avernus, the River Styx is commonly referred to as the Blood River. And perhaps that is true among foreign explorers, a misconception from those that do not possess a firm understanding of the distorted and often changing Avernian landscape, because there is required nuance to this lore that has been left out by most mortal documentarians. So let us pause here for just a moment in order to clear up this common mistake that often conflates what are in fact two distinct rivers among the dozens of rivers that crisscross Avernus. In doing so, it should be noted that, at least in this instance, the confusion does not stem from the lore itself, just the mortal interpretation. With the exception of the 4th edition text, the lore here across the 2nd, 3rd, and 5th edition writings has consistently maintained that the River Styx and the River of Blood are two distinct channels with an important caveat. As the powerful Styx cuts its way through the first layer, approximately halfway through its journey before descending into the lower hells, it is then joined by the Blood River, a separate channel native to Avernus that is fed by another large body of water called the Lake of Blood. The River of Blood is, unlike the Styx, an actual river of, well, blood. Clotted, vile, and thick as tomato soup, its waters, if you can even call them that, are full of infernal leeches and who knows what else. The Lake of Blood, which feeds this river, spills from the Stigmaris Mountains, where some versions of the history tell us the blood is sourced from all past victims of the lair. Lore that admittedly can quite easily be interpreted as coming from the Blood War. So while there is no doubt that carnal runoff from the endless conflicts of the Blood War certainly adds a crimson element to the River Styx, it is in actuality the merging of a river of, actual blood that is primarily responsible for this awful transformation. And thus, the River Styx upon Avernus is a reflection of change, both literal and symbolic. A most striking reminder that all you will find here is endless violence. Just remember, whether it's Stygian black or arterial red, the river is a master thief of mind and memory, perhaps a mercy to some, given where you are and what lies ahead. I hope you're enjoying what is just the beginning of one of the deepest lore expeditions through 9 layers of eternal damnation. But I have to pause to state the obvious. Navigating these layers is, well, hell, literally. And to keep these lore discoveries coming requires its own form of fiendish bargaining. So while we're paused between raging rivers of blood and the harvesting of infernal souls, how about you consider supporting this expedition with an infernal like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification for regular lore dispatches from all across the lower planes. And if you've got a few spare soul coins rattling around, maybe check out my Patreon, where I'm closing in on 50 player, DM, and world-building resources from art packs to adventures. I can promise it's the easiest pack you will ever sign in the 9 hells, and it won't cost you your soul. You can join for free or support the channel for a single $1 a month. Links are below, including Discord invites and Buy Me a Coffee donations. Thank you. Now, careful getting off the boat, and no using the river's waters as an excuse to forget that like. As the front line of the Blood War, Avernus presents visually as a bleak art house, showcasing only the wages of war and death, the resulting consequence of a conflict with no end. Travelers here will immediately take note of the domain's scars of battle, littered in every direction and as far as the eye can see, with the bones and corpses of fallen fiends, both ancient and new, and the smoking burnt-out husks of innumerable war machines, their twisted metal a snapshot of the carnage they wrought and absorbed. As previously mentioned, all incursions into the Hells must pass through Avernus first. As such, Hell's first layer has for its entire existence functioned as the embattled front door of the 9 Hells, enduring its role as the buffer between the multiverse and Hell's secrets, powers, and evils that dwell below. As a forced bottleneck that significantly hinders travel or invasion below, Avernus has in effect been sacrificed to protect the lower 8 realms, existing for all intents and purposes as nothing more than a massive killing field. And for the often self-serving archdukes of the deeper hells, this is a sacrifice they are happy to concede, far preferring to fight their battles here rather than on their own turf. Those mythical legends that told of vibrant beauty and serene calm now lie buried under countless millennia of blood, bone, and viscera. The Avernus of today trembles and fractures with distant explosions and the occasional downpours of burning pitch or stinging blood rain from clouds of black smoke. Environmental hazards include explosive gas pockets, searing heat in some regions, and bitter chill in others, and the ever-present risk of stumbling into an ongoing battle that can erupt at any time. Here at Hell's Gate, the fury of the abyss meets the cold discipline of the 9 hells in ceaseless battles that have endured for millennia. Amid this inhospitable and ravaged expanse march Hell's legions. Blood-seeking bearded devils form their own savage ranks. Vast legions of Maragon devils march in obedient and rigid unison, and spiked companies of hulking, barbed homocula devils lustfully crash into their sworn demonic enemies. And behind these countless fiendish battalions stand towering pit fiend commanders and generals, cracking barbed whips to keep lesser troops in line, as standards made of flayed skin and tattered cloth flutter in the hot blood of fused wind. Their tactics are as varied and brilliant as they are brutal, a requirement when facing an endless horde. Disciplined shield walls of the Batazu meet chaotic Tanaree charges, while hidden razor wire caltrops disguised as battlefield debris turn the treacherous terrain into yet another weapon. Infernal commanders excel at funneling abyssal hordes into designated killing zones, exploiting choke points and orchestrating tactical retreats designed to lure foes into devastating ambushes. Winged Tonnery silhouettes from Quasits to Vrox to the demonic flying pigs known as the Nalfeshni and worse dot the far horizon, only to be shot down by infernal ballista or torn apart midair by infernal squadrons of flying devils. When a demon falls, its ichor splatters the ground, sometimes causing horrific, spontaneous growths. Sickly green lightning crackles where the demonic blood stains, and from those vile pools, new horrors might slither forth. The devils must continually respond in force to contain these demonic outbreaks, for even in hell, the raw and endless chaos of the abyss is most perilous. Thus, the infernal legions are constantly on the move, shoring up breaches, reinforcing citadels, and ambushing any abyssal hordes that manage to spill through the portals or along the foul course of the River Styx. In the later texts of the 5th edition, specifically the lore of the Descent into Avernus campaign, we learn of new infernal war machines, fueled by the diabolical soul coins, roaring across the war-torn wastelands, adding firepower to the devil armies, along with heavy smoke and raging machine oil fires to the already hellish environment. The Blood War dominates all aspects of Avernian existence. Legions of devils constantly train, march, or recover from battles against the demonic forces that regularly attempt to establish footholds here. The intensity of this eternal conflict means that Avernus' landscape is never truly static. Today's battlefield becomes tomorrow's trench fortification, becomes next week's mass grave. Strategic locations change hands repeatedly, with only the most fortified positions remaining under constant control, and every battle is a bitter illustration of the constant ebb and flow between brute force assaults, cunning defensive emplacements, and scorched earth retreats that define this war. We have only scratched the surface of the Blood War here. For those that are interested, I have a full 45-minute volume of discovery that is fully dedicated to the lore, history, and grim details of the Blood War that you can check out in the links below. We will close out this chapter with a quote provided in the 2nd edition Planescape lore that I think provides us the best single-line description of the first of Hell's 9 layers. "Abandon hope, all ye who enter Avernus." Avernus isn't just at war, it is war, in the clearest definition of the word. Its clotted landscape perpetually fertilized with failure and fiendish remains, all locked in a grinding, visceral stalemate with no end in sight. It should be clearly outlined at this point in our discovery that Avernus is primarily known as the most enduring theater of war across the multiverse. And while this label is both accurate and well-deserved, Hell's first layer also plays another role, overshadowed by the constant fog of war, but one that is arguably just, if not more, important. And that is the layer's capacity to facilitate the intake and processing of new infernal souls. Souls make up the dominant form of currency within the 9 hells. More than gold or material resources, without a constant influx of evil souls, the 9 hells would have no ability to wage war against its enemies. Mainly, the Tonnery demon hordes who we must not forget are literally endless. Suffering no resource drain to replace their numbers, the armies of the Abyss operate on the Dungeons & Dragons equivalent of a God mode cheat code, the result of which would have seen the 9 hells conquered and annexed by the Abyssal Lords long ago. And while the vast majority of mortals understandably care not at all for evil, no matter what form it takes, anyone who studies such things will quickly realize an undeniable truth. The 9 hells perform what is quite possibly the most thankless of roles as the single defense, the buffer if you will, that has thus far prevented the demonic hordes of chaos from overrunning the material plane. A task that the 7 heavens of Mount Celestia should fulfill, or at least contribute to, but that are instead content to watch from their golden halls, a fact often lamented by the archdevil ruler of Avernus and former solar angel, Zariel. And to keep the fires of Hell's many soul forges alight, we must first look upon an estuary stemming from the River Styx, to find the rocky shoals of the Lake of Despond. There are those that suffer a less gruesome fate thanks to their infernal pacts and bargains. There are souls who benefit from deals struck on the fugue plane, and even others that arrive to their new afterlife by way of falling soul meteors. Still, for the vast majority of mortal souls, the Lake of Despond is the initial point of entry for those damned to the infernal, marking the start of their internal servitude to one fiendish master or another. Here, these horrendous, often malformed beings, or petitioner souls, arrive to be harvested like overripe fruit from awaiting devils tasked with their collection. Each will be delivered to one of many intake stations across the layer for soul extraction, a process that is just as horrible as it sounds, after which their quivering hollow husks will be discarded into the maggot pit. Spanning a diameter of 1,000 feet, the maggot pit exists as a gruesome but necessary crater of torment. And for the overwhelming majority of souls bound to an afterlife in the Nine Hells, this is the final stop of their intake, but only the beginning of their endless misery. There, among millions more just like it, they will writhe in a primordial-like ooze, sometimes for centuries or longer, as they wait to be consumed, excreted, and eventually promoted, most often transformed into the amorphous and insignificant fiends known as the Lemure. Due to its proximity to the lair of Tiamat, it makes sense that a guardian of the Dragon Queen, a red Abishai named Araka, is said to keep a watchful eye over the pit, ensuring both process efficiency and protection of the excruciarch pain devils that tirelessly work there. Landing upon Avernus to begin your infernal afterlife, one will quickly realize immortal souls are not special. They are not divine sparks. Each is nothing more than an easily converted and spent currency. From the Lake of Despond to the Maggot Pit, Avernus operates as a highly efficient, soul-extracting assembly line, a cruel but necessary cog in the soul economy of the Nine Hells. When it comes to the rulership of Avernus, the lore is a messy tangle of conflicted tales, histories, and unfortunately retcons. While there are only 3 known rulers of Hell's first layer through the ages, the inconsistencies are still glaring. In contrast to the other 8 layers of Hell, which certainly have their own conflicts to be sure, but for the most part have each seen a modicum of stability in their leadership, Avernus stands out for what planner scholars delicately refer to as divergent infernal histories of rulership. Of course, this is nothing more than an academic way of saying the lore is oftentimes more than a little confusing. In fact, there are several aspects of Avernian history that are wholly incompatible, all reflecting the first layer as perhaps holding the most turbulent political history across the Nine Hells. And while 5e did what it could in streamlining the lore for ease and simplicity, it did so the only way it actually could, by cutting, forgetting, and retconning. And if you're okay with that, then problem solved. I, on the other hand, am not okay with the wholesale removal of lore spanning multiple resources. So in this chapter, I will do my best to provide the most consensus lore as it's understood, chronologically, by edition. Just know that conflicts do exist. With that understanding, the earliest texts of the first edition were crystal clear. Tiamat, the 5-headed evil queen of dragons, was the first and most improbable ruler of Avernus, confirmed in the very first original monster manual from 1977, where the text tells us Tiamat rules the first plane of the Nine Hells, where she spawns all evil dragon kind. This canonical lore would be cemented by Ed Greenwood's own early lore from 1983 and detailed in Dragon Magazine number 75. Tiamat ruled from her lair the Dragon Spawn Pits, a vast cavernous complex located not far from the entrance to Draukari, Kurtlemac's divine realm of the kobolds. The Dragon Spawn Pits, also a divine realm within Avernus, was initially layered by an ancient dragon god and rival of Tiamat named Azarul, now a dead power. All the lore from this early era, while confirming her role, also suggests pretty clearly that Tiamat was, by almost any metric, a rather poor ruler of the plane. and as the 2nd edition lore evolved, Tiamat would be demoted greatly, tumbling from Lord of the First to a glorified guard dog. In this more subservient role, the Queen of Dragons would be tasked with guarding the only known entrance to Hell's 2nd lair, meaning travel to Dis would always require passing through her lair. Although I must point out rumors do exist that speak of other means to access the Iron City below. Despite her political failures and ultimate demotion, Tiamat's loyalty to Asmodeus was never questioned, eventually resulting in her elevation to a demigoddess in 1346 Dale Reckoning. Following Tiamat's early and conflicted role, the 2nd edition lore of Planescape would cryptically obscure the identity of the 2E ruler of Avernus, and even suggested that this archdevil was not Tiamat's successor, but in fact the first or original ruler for millennia, potentially making Tiamat either the 2nd ruler of Avernus, or as most assume, a clear-cut retcon. Regardless, we can make a pretty strong steelman argument that this intentional obfuscation was driven at least in part by the satanic panic that TSR, as the original publishers of Dungeons & Dragons, were dealing with at this time. Fun fact, I've mentioned this before, but the Planescape setting's introduction of the Batazu and the Tanari were primarily created so the lore could replace the words devil and demon, due to pressures caused by the insanity that was one of the most ridiculous of moral panics seen in the United States. So with the release of the Planes of Law 2E resource in 1995, we're simply told of a mysterious and unnamed Archduke of Avernus. We are also told that Bel, a powerful pit fiend who previously served Dispater, as mentioned in the first Monster Manual number 2, was now the top commander of the Batazu armies of Avernus, serving under this incognito Archduke. 2nd edition would also give us the Dark Eight, a war council of 8 pit fiend generals who orchestrate the military efforts of the 9 Hells, and appointed Bel as the fiendish general to lead the Batazu in the Blood War. While our 2nd Archduke ruler of Avernus remained unnamed in the early Planescape lore, the pages of Dragon Magazine number 223 in 1995 would begin to lift the veil. Well, sort of. While new lore found in an article titled The Lords of the Nine still refused to give her a name, this was undeniably in hindsight the earliest glimpse into the story of, you guessed it, Zariel. 1999's Guide to Hell would reveal her name officially and at last, as well as first characterizing Zariel as an aggressive warmongering devil, detailing her role in the attempted coup and fiendish civil war known as the Reckoning of Hell. It is also worth noting here that despite these various reveals of Zariel in her early incarnation, the lore all but confirms she was always an archdevil, with none of the celestial, fallen solar angel lore that would feature so prominently in the 5th edition text. Now, for me personally, I had always thought that Zariel's fallen angel persona was first introduced in 2014's Rise of Tiamat adventure, so color me surprised when my research netted a 2011 Dungeon 197 Codex of Betrayal article that I believe is the first canonical reference to Zariel as a fallen angel. The lore continues that for centuries or perhaps millennia, Zariel commanded Avernus' armies until her aggressive, and many would say reckless tactics, driven far more by bloodlust than any sound military strategy, left her vulnerable to her own political coup. This 2E lore would tell that in 1372 Dale Reckoning, Bel, then serving as her warlord, would betray Zariel, deposing her rule and usurping the crown. By the 3rd edition text, Bel would hold the title of Archduke of Avernus, but ruled under the watchful eyes and perhaps thumbs of the Dark Eight, who held majority power in Avernus, as well as the ear of Asmodeus in this era. Through 3E lore found in the Manual of the Planes and the Book of Vile Darkness, we also learn that Bel keeps Zariel imprisoned in his fortress and seat of power in Avernus, deep in the bowels of the Bronze Citadel, where he drains her essence to empower himself. The Fiendish Codex II from 2006 would further solidify Bel as the Lord of Avernus, describing how he runs the Laire's war machines while Zariel languishes as a powerless and humiliated captive. Unlike many archdevils whose ambitions often exceed their capabilities, Bel, despite his 5th edition fate, is actually regarded as a brilliant military mind, and for a time, the Pit Fiend reigned, prosecuting the Blood War with shrewd tactics, fair leadership, and steady if unspectacular efficiency. But Zariel's story would not end in chains, and the writing was on the wall for Bel and the 5e lore. Watching the fiendish pendulum swing back, Asmodeus would see fit to reinstate Zariel. Some say it was after she made an ironclad promise to redouble Hell's efforts in the Blood War. Others whisper that Asmodeus simply found Bel too ambitious for comfort. Regardless of reason, Zariel was once again the Archduchess of Avernus, having not only reclaimed her throne, but with the 2019 release of the Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus adventure, she also received a new shiny coat of lore paint. This 5e module not only confirms Zariel as the ruler, but contextualizes her backstory as a former Solar Angel, even inserting her into the historic tale of the Hell Riders of El Turel. Zariel's full 5e story as a fallen celestial, her frustration with the inaction of the Seven Heavens in the Blood War, her role in the Hell Ride, and how she became the next Archdevil ruler of Avernus is a fascinating tale, and I have an entire video dedicated to it that you can check out if you're interested in the links below. In today's lore of the 5e text, Bel has been relegated to an advisor and second-in-command, where in a fit of deja vu, he begrudgingly is serving Zariel, waiting for her reckless tactics to open up a path for the Pit Fiend General to betray her once again. And rumors persist to this day that Zariel's true agenda might include some form of vengeance against Asmodeus for past betrayals. But at least for now, she's focusing her aggressive animus towards the Tanar'ri demons through the Blood War. As we close out this chapter on the rulers of Avernus, I'm compelled to circle back to Tiamat for a brief moment to share some obscure lore that you may not be aware of, while also clearing up another confusing and divergent lore point. Shortly before Zariel would be given her crown once again, and not long after the spell plague of 1385, Asmodeus would first, for reasons unknown, once again offer Tiamat the rulership of Avernus. However, the Queen of Chromatic Dragons and now demi-goddess sensed the political no-win quagmire that lied ahead. Not to mention, she clearly wasn't very interested or good at the whole ruling a lair of hell thing. So ultimately she refused. And while refusing the Lord of the Nine is not the healthiest of decisions, Tiamat softened the blow by instead offering to be the champion of Asmodeus by devouring all who might oppose him. The Lord of Lies would accept her offer, which is why Tiamat is today considered a prisoner on Avernus. This is confirmed by the 5e Dungeon Master's Guide on page 64. However, the word prisoner does require some context. While she is a prisoner as defined by the strictest letter of the law interpretation, the Dragon Queen and demi-goddess does not live the life of a shackled dragon. Her imprisonment is not literal chains, but rather a metaphysical and/or contractual binding to Avernus by her chosen oath to Asmodeus. Some of this confusion likely surrounds the Tyranny of Dragons 3-adventure campaign, and specifically the Rise of Tiamat, which centers on cultists attempting to free the Dragon Queen. But unless the players succeed in the ritual, she remains imprisoned. And even if the ritual was successful at your table, that would be a campaign-specific event for your table, and in no way would be considered the default state of the multiverse. To my understanding, as of the 2025 published lore, no official source has yet to establish that Tiamat has been permanently freed from Avernus or her oath to Asmodeus in the core Forgotten Realms timeline. Regardless, Avernus is perhaps the most revolving of Hell's 9 thrones. Was Tiamat first? Who knows? Throw a dart. Zariel's fumble, Bel's coup, Zariel's reboot. The Avernian crown changes hands more often than a soul coin in a gambling den. It's never about succession. Today's Archduchess is yesterday's prisoner, and tomorrow, well, let's keep an eye on Bel. His plots and schemes are ever evolving. To travelers of the Nine Hells, the landscape of Avernus seems to rip a page straight from the Far Realm's handbook of madness and distortion, as its geography unfolds its secrets like a puzzle box, designed to deceive and confuse even the greatest of cartographers. The first and perhaps most crucial aspect any traveler to Avernus should know is that the land itself actively resists conventional mapping. Charted distances shrink or expand without warning, landmarks shift or even occasionally relocate overnight, and the terrain reconfigures itself with malicious intent, leaving every known mortal map mostly useless. What follows then is in no way a map, but rather a compendium of the notable landmarks and points of interest, known or said to exist within Avernus. But understand that any precise locations must be acknowledged as fundamentally unreliable. The most imposing structure you will find across all of Avernus is the Bronze Citadel, a fortress city of staggering scope and scale. Exceeding 600 square miles by some accounts, this massive stronghold serves as the primary military installation for the forces tasked with defending the Nine Hells from invasion. Depending upon your chosen lore, this ever-expanding bulwark is ringed by 12 or 14 heavily defended bronze walls, each progressively more fortified than the last. The largest fortification on Avernus by far, the Bronze Citadel presents an imposing stance of infernal military strength and engineering. The citadel is lined with countless ballista and iron catapults, and houses hundreds of thousands of rank-and-file lesser devils and their hulking war machines, each ready to be deployed at a moment's notice against any threat to the Nine Hells. Inside, the citadel hums with activity, its operations performed with clockwork precision. Legions drill in perfect formation, weapons are maintained to immaculate standards, and punishment for any inefficiency is swift and brutal. Unlike the chaotic fortresses of the Abyss, where form only follows anarchy and madness, every aspect of the Bronze Citadel serves a specific, expressed purpose in this theater of war. When Bel ruled Avernus, the Bronze Citadel served as his seat of power, a reflection of his military background and tactical mind. And when not in Nessus, the pit fiend generals of the Dark Gate are most often found here. But while the Bronze Citadel represents Hell's grinding, immovable defense, Avernus under Zariel's new management prefers a more dynamic approach to military strategy, which brings us to Zariel's Flying Fortress. Since regaining her crown, Zariel has shunned the traditional seat of power in Avernus, the Bronze Citadel, in favor of her own mobile command center in the form of a massive flying fortress that drifts across the skies of her domain. This colossal structure combines elements of a warship, prison, and palace, allowing the fallen solar angel turned archdevil to personally oversee critical battles in the Blood War, while remaining defensible against both external threats and internal conspiracy. The mobility of this headquarters best accommodates Zariel's aggressive military style. Unlike her predecessor Bel, Zariel, driven by her bloodlust, prefers to lead from the front, her fortress often seen descending from the crimson skies at critical moments of battle to inspire her troops and terrify her enemies. While Zariel commands Hell's legions from her mobile sky fortress, the true engine of war still grinds on below, fueled by the infernal industry of Bel's Forge. Though demoted from his position as ruler of Avernus, the Archdevil Bel still holds significant influence through control of the Lair's primary weapons manufacturing center, known to the lore simply as Bel's Forge. This sprawling industrial complex produces the majority of conventional weaponry used by the Devil Legions in the Blood War, from simple swords to complex siege engines. The forge occupies a vast caldera harnessing the natural heat of Avernus's volcanic activity to power its countless furnaces and smelters. Rivers of lava flow directly through channels in the facility, providing both power and material for the never-ending production of the infernal armaments. Through the use of infernal magic, the central fort can allegedly reach temperatures hot enough to melt even celestial metals. Bel himself oversees the most important projects, especially those involving captured or surrendered celestial weapons that need to be corrupted and then repurposed. His expertise in metallurgy and weapon craft is said to exceed that of any other known devil across all the Nine Hells, making Bel invaluable to Zariel's war effort despite the animus and open hostility that makes up their most complicated political relationship. Perhaps the most macabre of Avernus's landmarks is the infamous Pillar of Skulls, a grotesque towering collection of disembodied cranial trophies that rise out of a blood-soaked bog to reach more than a mile into the crimson sky. This hideous monument consists entirely of skulls, from fiendish casualties of the Blood War to those of lost travelers, especially sages and lore keepers who died, many with secrets untold, each arranged in a column of grinning death that serves as both warning and waypoint. The pillar functions as a psychological weapon of sorts, designed to demoralize invading forces and remind visitors of the consequences of opposing the Nine Hells. There are rumors that through foul magics, the pillar possesses dark sentience, able to whisper its secrets or offer guidance to those who dare listen. However, their words are often cryptic and do come at a price, usually of the most grim kind beforehand, leading many to question whether the knowledge gained is worth the risk. Whether the pillar serves some greater magical purpose beyond its incoherent babbling or the obvious intimidation value remains a matter of plainer debate. Some suggest it acts as a soul repository, others that it functions as a planar anchor, helping maintain the stability of the layer despite the constant battles that rage across it. However, the real secret of the Pillar of Skulls might be found simply in its location. There exists some obscure lore surrounding the particular ledge that the pillar stands upon, which just happens to reside at what is considered to be the lowest geographic elevation you're going to find on Avernus. Now, you might reasonably ask why this matters. The lore suggests, but never confirms, that from the vantage this nadir offers, you can see where an intrepid and coordinated adventurer could potentially reach the second layer of hell below by means of a particularly tall metallic spire that rises up from the iron city of Dis to nearly puncture into the Avernus air. A tower that is just close enough for a daring explorer to make a heroic leap onto a spire which invites what looks almost like stairs to facilitate your descent. If these legendary rumors are to be believed, and I make no claim or care to verify them personally, doing so would provide the only known means to circumvent the more official and sufficiently guarded access points to Dis, such as the gates through Tiamat's lair. The Basalt Tower is likely best remembered by those who played the expansion to the first Baldur's Gate game, The Siege of Dragonspear. The tower's most unique property is its connection to the material plane and specifically to Dragonspear Castle. This fortress watchtower offers a strategic vantage point for overseeing large expanses of the surrounding territory, useful for military planning and surveillance in the ongoing conflicts. In fact, during ancient times, specifically during Zariel's pre-celestial retcon and first reign as ruler of Avernus, the Basalt Tower was considered her seat of power. And depending upon your timeline, if a traveler were to visit the Basalt Tower today, they are likely to encounter a particular Batazu, a Cornigan horn devil named Thrix the Profane, who guarded its interests from the Year of the Cold Soul in 1281 Dale Reckoning until well into the 14th century. However, in more recent times, the site has seen significant conflict, particularly in the Year of the Banner, 1368 DR. During this time, it was the location of a final standoff by the Batazu Belhifit against the forces of the Aasimar Paladin and the Baalspawn, as detailed in the aforementioned expansion, Siege of Dragonspear. Connecting many of these landmarks with the rest of the realm is the Great Avernus Road, a massive infernal highway commissioned under Bel's rule to serve as the primary route for rapid, large army movements and fortified supply convoys originating from the Bronze Citadel. Unlike the ever-shifting nature of the surrounding terrain, this road maintains a relatively fixed position, anchored through powerful infernal magic to provide stability in an otherwise unstable geography. Speaking of roads, James Boswell once wrote in 1791 that hell is paved with good intentions, so it's more than fitting that Avernian lore would include the obscure and ironic landmark known as the Road of Good Intent. Little has been written of the road, offering only that the ruins of cities and gate towns that were corrupted into hell lie along its path, which crosses over the River Styx and ends at the Maggot Pit. The lore specifically names the corrupt city of Darkspine, while also mentioning Ribcage along with unnamed others as ruins that line this road. Darkspine was once a thriving but utterly corrupt mortal gate town in the Outlands. Ultimately, the city would be engulfed in a great planar rift and dragged into the hells where it now stands as a haunting ruin. A tragic fate that some claim was well-deserved. While the city has all but been forgotten to time and the more recent lore, there are a few historical notes to share. There are rumors, these include gangs of exiled and outlawed devils, namely Excruciarchs and Bearded Devils, having taken up residence in Darkspine's ruins, and another that promises of a hidden portal to Hell's second lair of Dis, located somewhere in the ruins. But again, these rumors are 100% unconfirmed, so proceed with caution. The only confirmed lore that we really have speaks of a single tavern known as the Pig and Poke that is said to be open for business in the city's ruins. Second-hand accounts state the place seems completely deserted upon entry, but that its barkeep, a Falxagon or harvester devil named Jebelim, can appear at a moment's notice to serve unsuspecting customers, possibly attempting to ply a mortal into signing a Faustian pact after a few strong drinks. And if he can't tempt you into a drunken dark bargain, it's said he will file a report to profile your apparent strengths and weaknesses with one of the Dark Age generals. And that's it. There's nothing written on the ruins of Ribcage, but I do have to take a moment to at least mention that the writings of the 5th edition really missed an opportunity to not only flesh out this point of interest further, but should have in my opinion, use the descent into Avernus city of El Turel to somehow be incorporated along this road. There are, of course, other notable locations that, depending upon your timeline, may or may not exist. Avernus is home to at least 3 divine realms. The kobold deity Kurtlemak holds his realm Draukari upon this layer, as does the deity Bargriviak, whose realm is known as the Peaceable Lands. Additionally, the Mulharandi deity Set once maintained part of his divine realm, Anquagat, in Avernus. However, the more current lore has the Egyptian-inspired realm now located on Hell's 5th layer, Stygia. In the 5e lore of the Descent to Avernus campaign, you will find the Bleeding Citadel, the Scab, Fort Knucklebones, and the Crypt of the Hell Riders. And we can't forget the city of El Turel, that for a time looked like it would share the same fate as Darkspine, all of which I've covered previously, so feel free to check out. From bleeding skies to its maggot-filled pits, Avernus isn't just Hell's front door. It's the promise that, yes, things will only get worse from here. Chart your course through Avernus if you must. Just know that the maps often lie. War is constant, and the only reliable exits require an eternity of paperwork, signed in triplicate, and usually with your soul. So that completes my Traveler's Guide to Avernus, a lore deep dive that will definitely not earn an endorsement from Hell's Board of Tourism. So if you found it useful, interesting, or entertaining, then please consider supporting the work. Links are below to my Patreon, where you can support me for a single $1 a month, along with access to the channel Discord and Buy Me a Coffee donations. Thank you for listening. I hope we can do this again on Layer 2, Dis. Until then, take care, my friends.